Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. His wife said, "His presence irritates me. I wish he would disappear forever." And he disappeared. What he left behind made her scream. Honestly, his presence irritates me. I wish he would just disappear forever so I can finally be with you. Those are the words Tiffany Carter whispered to her lover on the phone, her laughter sharp enough to cut glass, unaware that her devoted husband of 5 years was standing in the hallway, hearing her betrayal. She had no idea that the construction worker she mocked in secret was about to grant her wish in the most devastating way possible. What happened next would challenge the very idea of love, betrayal, and the cost of taking a person's devotion for granted. The sound of Tiffany's laughter carried through the thin crack of the front door of their modest brick home in Detroit, Michigan. Deshawn's hand froze on the knob, his chest tightening beneath a new pressure he did not yet know how to name. He leaned closer, the grit of the day from the job site still clinging to his boots, and caught the sharp edge of her voice. "Honestly, his presence irritates me," Tiffany said. "He does not even realize how small he is compared to you. I wish he would just disappear forever." The words slid into him like a blade. His breath caught. His throat closed. On the other side of the door, Tiffany's tone softened into a giggle. Light, playful, the kind of sound he had not heard directed at him in years. Each laugh peeled away what comfort remained in their 5-year marriage. He stayed still, rooted on the porch. She went on, speaking in hushed, breathy fragments. A name slipped once. Brandon Pierce. A man he had never met, but had heard about in passing remarks. Wealthy, charming, the type who sent flowers in glass vases and tickets to places Deshawn's overtime wages could never buy. He closed his eyes and listened until the final click of the call ended. Only then did he turn the knob. The door creaked open. Tiffany sat curled on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, phone face down at her side. She looked up quickly, her expression smooth, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You are home early," she said. "Job wrapped sooner than expected," he said, holding his voice steady. He stepped inside, set his dented lunch pail on the counter, and hung his jacket by the door. His movements were slow, deliberate, practiced, each one a mask to cover the fracture widening inside him. The living room smelled faintly of her perfume, the expensive kind she claimed she bought on discount, but that he had once seen in glossy magazines. Her wine glass, still half full, sat on the coffee table beside an open lifestyle magazine. She reached for it casually, as though nothing had happened. He lowered himself into his usual chair, his hands resting on his knees, calloused and raw from the day's labor. He looked at her briefly, just long enough to memorize the curve of her jaw, the ease with which she sipped, the absence of guilt in her eyes. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. He listened to it, each second hammering into him like nails driven into wood. He did not speak of what he had heard. He did not ask. He did not demand. Instead, he sat in silence and let bitterness settle where she could not see it. Inside, something shifted. The man she mocked as small was no longer wounded. He was calculating. Her words, meant as an insult, had become an instruction. She wanted him gone. Soon she would learn what it truly meant to live without him. 3 days passed beneath a thin film of silence. Deshawn moved through the house like a shadow, steady, polite, always where he was expected to be, never betraying the storm simmering behind his eyes. He kissed her cheek when she left for errands, brought in the mail, carried groceries in from the car. Tiffany moved as if nothing had cracked the surface of their marriage, as if her words had not shattered the foundation he had built with calloused hands and long hours. She hummed around the kitchen, scrolled through her phone, and laughed at messages that were not meant for her husband to hear. On the third night, she set a glass of wine beside her dinner plate and leaned back in her chair with a controlled composure. "I've been thinking," she said, stirring her pasta with absent-minded circles. "I need a break. Time for myself. A solo vacation. Just a few weeks to rediscover myself." He lifted his fork, twirled it, and tasted the food. He chewed slowly, his face unreadable in the amber glow of the dining room light. "How long?" he asked. 3 weeks, she said quickly, almost eagerly. "I found a retreat package in Miami Beach. Beautiful beaches, quiet mornings. Time to figure out what I want." The fork rested against the rim of his plate. He swallowed, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and nodded once. If that is what you want. Her eyes searched his face, waiting for resistance. None came. His acceptance loosened something in her shoulders. She took a sip of wine, her lips curling. I knew you would understand, she said, almost to herself. He finished his meal in silence, excused himself, and went upstairs to shower. The water beat against his skin, hot and relentless, but did nothing to wash away the sound of her laughter or the words she had spoken into that phone. His chest ached, but beneath the ache was resolve, hardening into something sharp and immovable. The following week moved swiftly. Tiffany hummed as she packed new clothes into her suitcase. Shopping bags lined the bedroom wall. He carried them to the trunk without complaint, folding shirts with careful precision when she asked for help. He watched her toss flip-flops and sunscreen into a beach tote, watched her smile sideways at a text she never let him see. He drove the silver sedan he had bought for her 2 years earlier, its interior still smelling faintly of leather conditioner. Tiffany sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone, humming under her breath. New luggage lay stacked in the back seat, tags already printed with her name. The interstate unfurled in long, gray stretches, headlights slicing through early morning mist. Neither spoke much. She tapped her foot to the rhythm of a pop song leaking from her earbuds. He kept his eyes on the road, his hand steady on the wheel. At the terminal drop-off at Detroit Metropolitan Wayne County Airport, he lifted her suitcases onto the curb. Travelers hurried past with rolling bags, voices blending into the low hum of announcements echoing across the high ceilings. Tiffany smoothed her hair, adjusted her sunglasses, and turned to him. "Do not wait up for me," she said with a light laugh. "I will be too busy finding myself." He placed her last suitcase beside her, closed the trunk, and looked at her calmly. "Take care of yourself." She leaned in, brushed a quick kiss against his cheek, and walked toward the sliding glass doors. He watched her blend into the crowd, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. He followed at a distance, waiting near the observation windows. He saw her pass through security, pausing briefly before the checkpoint to glance at her boarding pass. Then she disappeared into the stream of passengers. He remained until the plane lifted from the runway, its nose breaking through the morning haze. Only then did he turn, his hands sliding into his jacket pockets as he walked back toward the parking garage. By the time he slid behind the wheel, his plan had already hardened. The car hummed beneath him as he steered onto the exit ramp. The dashboard clock ticked past 9 as the city woke around him. He did not linger at home. By mid-morning, he was seated in a realtor's office downtown, Fisher & Roberts Realty, its blinds drawn against the sharp light. The office smelled faintly of fresh coffee and printer ink. Across from him sat a woman in a navy blazer, hair swept into a neat bun, eyes sharp but polite. "You said you want to move fast," she began, sliding a single sheet forward. "If you sign this listing agreement, I can have the photographer here before noon. The property will be on the market by tonight." He rested his calloused hands on the paper. His thumb rubbed its edge as if smoothing a rough plank. He had built dreams in that house, one overtime check at a time, and now he was preparing to let it go without ceremony. "How quick can it sell?" he asked. "In this market," Denise Roberts tapped her pen. "A week, 2 at most. Cash buyers move fast." He nodded once. The pen felt heavy in his grip, but the stroke of his signature was steady. With each letter of his name, one more strand of the life he shared with Tiffany came undone. Denise gathered the sheet and gave him a firm smile. "Leave it with me. I will be in touch before the day is out." When he stepped back outside, sunlight struck him in the face. He paused, letting the heat sink into his skin. The decision was no longer hovering in his mind. It was inked into a contract. He did not drive home. Instead, he turned the car toward the courthouse district. The hush of the building pressed against his chest as he stepped into the law office of Howard Green. The reception area smelled faintly of polish and paper. The carpet softened every footstep. In a quiet conference room, a man in a dark suit sat waiting, a leather folder open in front of him. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and looked up. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice measured, "you are here to begin divorce proceedings." "Yes," Deschamps said. He sat with squared shoulders and hands resting flat on the table. The lawyer opened the folder wider, revealing neat stacks of paper. I will need some information first. Years married. 5. Children. Deshawn's jaw tightened. None. Shared assets. None beyond the house, and a vehicle that will be gone by the end of the week. The lawyer jotted notes with quick, precise strokes. You understand that this is not finalized today. We prepare and file the petition now. Once it is with the court, the process begins formally. She will be served papers in due time. I understand. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried the quiet of a man who had already made peace with loss. The lawyer passed a form across the table. This gives me authorization to act on your behalf. Nothing more binding than that today. He read each line carefully and signed. The pen felt rough between his fingers. When he finished, his name sat on the page with firm clarity. We will file this afternoon, Green said. You will receive copies for your records once the clerk stamps them. Deshawn stood and shook his hand. Outside, clouds drifted low, flattening the light across Jefferson Avenue. He walked down the courthouse steps and paused on the sidewalk, the city's rhythm humming past him. Attorneys with briefcases, clerks with folders, strangers caught in their routines. He turned, slid into the sedan, and drove to a broker's lot on the edge of the city, Lawson Auto Exchange, where polished cars gleamed under a dull sky. A man with a clipboard stepped forward, brushing dust from his sleeve. You looking to sell? The broker asked, scanning him with a practiced eye. Title, registration, maintenance history. All in order, Deshawn said, handing him a folder. The man flipped it open, crouched beside the car, tapped a knuckle against the tire tread, then slid behind the wheel. The ignition turned clean. The engine caught with a smooth hum, settling over the lot like a low current. Good condition, the broker said. He flicked the lights, tested the wipers, let the engine idle, then shut it off and stepped out. Mileage. Deshawn gave him the number. The broker scribbled on his clipboard. We can list it today. Cars like this do not sit long. When it sells, the funds will go straight to your account. Deshawn nodded. His gaze lingered on the metallic paint, the faint scuffs near the handle, the leather interior he had worked long hours to afford. He said nothing. The broker tucked the folder beneath his arm. I will be in touch. Deshawn turned away, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. His work truck waited at the curb, plain and weathered, its seat molded to his weight. He climbed in, gripped the wheel, and started the engine. The rumble rose steady and familiar, carrying him back onto the road. The house was still when he stepped through the door. He did not switch on the lights. The faint glow from street lamps pressed against the windows, stretching shadows across the living room. He stood in the center, the silence wrapping around him. He sat heavily in his chair, the cushion molded by years of use. His hands rested on his knees, fingers spread wide. In the stillness, memories arrived uninvited. The first year of their marriage, a rented apartment with peeling paint and rattling pipes near Easter Market. Long shifts hauling lumber in the summer heat, welding until his arms ached, bringing his pay envelope home and placing it in her hands with pride, certain that every dollar meant progress. She had smiled, kissed him, and told him he was building their future. The night he surprised her with the silver sedan came back sharp and clear. He hid the keys in a box of her favorite chocolates, his palms sweating as she tore away the wrapper. She squealed with joy, threw her arms around his neck, and pressed her face into his shoulder. He thought he had given her proof of his devotion. Other fragments surfaced, standing in the rain outside a pharmacy with medicine when she had fallen ill, taking extra shifts to pay for a weekend getaway she said she needed, holding her hand at night, imagining the children they might one day raise beneath a roof they would call their own. Each memory pressed deeper into him, not with warmth, but with the ache of betrayal. Every sacrifice, every late night, every dream had been laid on sand. The woman who had once kissed him for the sedan now laughed in secret with another man, mocking the presence that had carried her through 5 years of stability. He leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling, jaw tight. He had loved without reserve and poured himself into the marriage until his body bore the weight of it. Cracked nails, bruised palms, sore muscles turned into mortgage payments and full cupboards. For what? The clock in the hallway ticked, steady and indifferent. Upstairs, the bedroom lay neat and untouched, her scent clinging to the pillows. He closed his eyes and let the silence expand. His love had been real. his sacrifices countless. But the past now sharpened his resolve. The third week arrived with papers stamped and phone calls answered. Denise's voice came first. Offer accepted. Contract signed. Funds clearing soon. Then the broker confirmed. The sedan was gone, and the funds were credited. The lawyer followed with the final packet. The papers ready for his signature. He drove back to Green's office, signed where the pen was placed, and left without a word. His name stood sharp on the page, closing the last door. Back at the house, he stood in the entryway with the keys heavy in his palm. Rooms once filled with her laughter, her perfume, her presence now felt hollow, waiting to be stripped bare. He pocketed the keys and climbed the stairs. In the bedroom, her dresses hung in a perfect row. Jewelry gleamed in shallow trays. Perfume bottles gathered on the dresser like glass soldiers. He opened a drawer, took out a silk scarf, and let it slip through his fingers before laying it back. Each object was a piece of the life she believed permanent. Each would be packed, and each would be gone. Downstairs, the kitchen sat clean, dishes stacked in cupboards, the refrigerator humming. He touched the counter where he had laid his pay envelopes, where he had left notes about dinner, where he had believed love was built. His hand lingered, then withdrew. The house no longer belonged to them. The car was no longer theirs. The marriage no longer held his name. Everything had been cut cleanly. Each piece of her comfort dismantled with precision. He stepped into the living room and let the stillness settle over him. The week's work was nearly done. The following day, he called his oldest friend, a man who had known him since they both played summer ball at a park on the west side, long before marriage and overtime shaped their lives. "Calvin," he said, "I need a hand." "Say when." Calvin replied, "I will be there." Together, they walked through the house with boxes lining the hallway. The air held the faint scent of cardboard and dust. Deshawn opened the closet. Dresses slipped from hangers into suitcases. Heels clattered softly as they settled into boxes. Jewelry trays were stacked carefully. Perfumes were sealed in plastic and placed between sweaters. "You sure about this?" Calvin asked quietly, wrapping a pair of earrings in tissue paper. "She told someone she wanted me gone," Deshawn said. "I am honoring her wish." Calvin nodded, said nothing, and kept working. The kitchen followed, cookbooks, dishes, utensils, and the little trinkets she liked to line up along the windowsill. The living room shelves were stripped bare. On the bed upstairs, Deshawn laid one suitcase open. He slipped a manila envelope inside, the divorce papers folded neatly. On top, he placed a single sheet in his own hand. "You wanted me gone. Now you have your wish." He zipped the case closed and stood back for a quiet second, as if marking the moment only for himself. By afternoon, the house stood hollow. No trace of her remained, only the echo of their footsteps across stripped floors. Deshawn carried his own belongings, tools, photo albums he would keep, a few worn books, and the weight of his workbench drawers, out to the truck. Calvin loaded the last of Tiffany's luggage into his own vehicle, ready to deliver it to her parents' house in the suburbs of Southfield. On the porch, Deshawn paused with the keys in hand. He looked once at the empty rooms and pulled the door shut. The lock clicked, final and sharp. He climbed into the truck, started the engine, and followed the road out of town along Interstate 75. At the light, Calvin turned in the opposite direction, carrying her things to the place where she would find them. Deshawn kept driving, the line of the highway stretching ahead. He passed Toledo and the long flat of northern Ohio, crossed into the hills of West Virginia, and continued through to North Carolina. The road gave him space that words could not. 3 weeks later, the wheels of a plane screeched against the tarmac in Detroit. Tiffany pressed her head back into the seat, a smile tugging at her lips. 3 weeks of escape. Sun on her skin, drinks at sunset, morning meditations, and boutique shopping. She rose from her seat with the easy assurance of someone certain her world waited exactly as she had left it. The cab ride from the airport moved slowly, traffic heavy under the afternoon sun. She sat in the back, scrolling through messages, rehearsing what she would say to her husband. Perhaps she would tell him she needed more time apart. Perhaps she would spin a story about clarity. Either way, she assumed the same life would be waiting, steady, predictable, the way he always was. When the cab turned onto her street, her smile froze. A different car sat in the driveway. The blinds were different too. Pale curtains she had never chosen. Fresh flowers bloomed in beds she had not planted. "Stop here," she snapped, tossing cash forward. The driver had not fully halted before she opened the door and dragged her suitcase toward the porch. The key scraped inside the lock, but refused to turn. She twisted harder until the metal bit into her palm. The lock had been changed. A child's laughter rang out inside. The sound cut through her. She pounded the door once, twice, her voice rising. "Deshawn, Deshawn, open the door." The door opened, but not to him. A woman she had never seen stood framed in the entry, a baby perched on her hip and a toddler peeking around her leg. Surprise flickered over the woman's face. "Can I help you?" "This is my house," Tiffany said, her voice cracking. "You are my house." The woman shook her head gently. "We just bought it. Closed 3 days ago." Tiffany staggered back, clutching her suitcase handle. She turned in a daze and pulled her phone from her bag. Deshawn's number rang once, then cut to an automated message. She tried again, faster, with the same result. Her hand trembled as she dialed her parents. Her mother answered at once. "Tiffany, thank God. We have been trying to reach you." "There are strangers in my house," Tiffany whispered. "My key does not work. Where is Deshawn?" "Come here," her mother said softly. "Please come here. We will show you what he left." The line went dead. Tiffany stood for a moment on the walkway, staring at windows that no longer belonged to her. Then, pulling her luggage behind her, she flagged another cab and gave the address in a hollow voice. The ride blurred. Houses, storefronts, trees, all smeared beyond the glass. Her chest tightened when her parents' home came into view. They stood waiting on the porch, her mother with her hands folded, her father with a jaw set. Inside, her father said, serious and steady, "You need to see." The house smelled of coffee and wood polish. Tiffany rolled her suitcase over the threshold. Her mother brushed her arm. Her father watched with a gaze that had grown heavier since she left. They led her down the hall without a word. The guest room door opened. Tiffany froze. Luggage, her luggage, stacked in neat rows against the wall. Boxes labeled in her husband's handwriting. Dresses folded with careful hands. Perfume bottles wrapped in newspaper. Shoes paired and aligned. Photographs tucked into envelopes. "What is this?" Her voice was thin. "What did he do?" Her father did not answer. He nodded toward the largest suitcase, resting at the front. Tiffany stumbled forward, knelt, and yanked the zipper. Inside, clothes were pressed close together, lavender sachets tucked between them. On top, a manila envelope. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Divorce papers slid out, each page stamped, his name signed in clean, deliberate strokes. On top lay a single handwritten note. "You wanted me gone. Now you have your wish." The words blurred as her eyes filled. A sound tore loose from her chest, raw and unshaped. A scream ripped through the quiet of her parents' house and rattled the frames on the wall. Papers scattered across the rug like leaves. Her mother moved toward her, but her father lifted a hand. They stood in the doorway as Tiffany crumbled beside the suitcase, the sobs broken and uneven. Every memory of comfort cracked under the weight of that envelope. The house she had claimed, the car she had driven, the security she had mocked. "He sold the house?" she asked finally, breathless and disbelieving. "He sold the car?" Her father answered. "Both. The realtor called us after the sale closed. The broker called about the car. The lawyer sent the documents to us and to you, but your phone was off. I was at a retreat." Tiffany pressed the heel of her palm against her forehead, as if she could press back time itself. "I did not know he would." Her voice faltered. Tears tracked hot down her face. Her mother knelt, but Tiffany flinched away from her touch. The shame burned as much as the shock. "He did this because of you," her mother said quietly, not cruelly, but without denial. "He did this because he heard you." Tiffany covered her face. Images flashed through her mind. The sedan's leather seats, the quiet nods at the kitchen table, the way he never argued about expenses, the late nights when he returned smelling of metal and dust. She had wielded him like a certainty, and then she had thrown him away with a careless sentence. "Where is he?" she whispered. "Where did he go?" "He left a few notes in the file. Nothing detailed," her father said. "A forwarding address for legal correspondence only. North Carolina." "North Carolina." She wiped her face and picked up a page from the stack. An address, and Charlotte stared back at her in the careful lines of his handwriting. The certainty of it filled the room more heavily than any accusing word could have done. Tiffany stood slowly. "I will go after him." Her mother spoke gently. "He asked us not to tell you more than what the documents require." Tiffany sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the neat rows of her life repacked by the man she had married. "He left me nothing," she said. "Not even an argument." "He left you everything you said you wanted," her father replied. "Distance. Silence. Your freedom." She flinched, then breathed in and out until her chest steadied. "I need to talk to him," she said. "He does not get to vanish without letting me explain." "Explain what?" her father asked quietly. "That you want him gone." She pressed her lips together. The question settled like a weight on her tongue. "I need to try," she said. "At least once." She showered at her parents' house and changed into clean clothes from the open suitcase. She moved with a stiffness that made her feel much older than she was. In the mirror, her face looked both familiar and strange. Eyes rimmed red, lips pressed thin, an expression she did not recognize. She booked a seat on an evening flight to Charlotte. Her mother drove her back to the airport through the slow curve of rush-hour traffic, neither of them speaking until they reached the curb. "If you see him," her mother said, "do not go to hurt him more. Go to listen." "I will listen," Tiffany said. "I promise." In Charlotte, she rented a compact car and drove through tree-lined streets, past newly built apartment complexes and brick storefronts. The address led her to a small rental house on a quiet block where the yards were neatly kept and the porches held wind chimes that clinked softly in the evening breeze. She parked across the street and sat for a moment, her hands tied on the wheel. A porch light burned. A shadow moved behind the curtains. She swallowed and stepped out. When she reached the porch, the door opened before she could knock. Deshawn stood there, framed by the entry, wearing a worn college sweatshirt she did not recognize and a look that was not anger so much as a measured calm. "You found the forwarding address," he said. "I had to," she answered, standing straighter. "I could not let it end with a note." He stepped back and let her in. The house was spare but clean. A dining table, 2 chairs, a bookshelf with a few tools and manuals, a framed photograph of his parents, an old record player, a mattress on a low frame in the bedroom beyond. "You settled in quickly," she said, her voice small in the simple room. "I settled," he said. "Quickly is just a word for when you have no reason to stay where you were." She clasped her hands to keep from reaching for him. "You could have told me you were leaving," she said. "You told someone else you wanted me gone," he replied. "I did not think you needed a second notification." She looked down. "I was cruel," she said. "I was trying to impress someone who has no place in my life. I wanted to feel like I mattered more than the bills and the shifts and the routine. It was foolish." "It was a choice," he said calmly. "You made many. I made mine in response." "Did you listen to the entire call?" she asked. "I listened long enough to hear what mattered," he said. She took a breath. "Brandon is nothing," she said. "He is a performance. Everyone is always performing for someone. I am not proud of it." "I am not interested in Brandon," Deshawn said. "I am interested in the fact that my wife spoke of me that way, not as a moment of anger, but as a truth she enjoyed sharing." She lifted her head. "I did enjoy it for a second," she said. "That is the worst part. I felt powerful for half a minute. Then I laughed and said the worst thing I could say, and I did not feel anything at all. I did not expect you to forgive me. I came to say I am sorry and to ask if there is anything left to save." He looked at her for a long, stark moment. "Do you want there to be?" he asked. She searched for the easiest answer and found none. "I want the version of us that I believed in to have a chance," she said finally. "I know I do not deserve that chance, but I want it anyway." He nodded once, as if appreciating the honesty even as it did not change his conclusions. "You want to control," he said. "You used me as your anchor and sneered at the very rope that kept you steady. I will not tie myself back to that version of us." "What would it take?" she asked. "A time machine," he said quietly, "and a marriage where you did not turn my name into a joke for someone else." She closed her eyes. The truth struck more cleanly than anger could have. "Then it is over," she said. "The papers say it is," he answered. "I did not come here to argue. I came here to live." "You came here to live," she repeated softly. "I will not argue with that." She walked to the bookcase and looked at the framed photograph of his parents. "Your mother always said to me, 'Do not let your pride talk louder than your love.' I let my pride make speeches. I am sorry. He did not smile. Even that sentence is about your performance, he said. But thank you for saying it. She turned back to him. I do not expect to be forgiven, she said. But I need to ask you for one thing. What is that? Let me carry my boxes out of my parents' house myself, she said. They do not deserve the weight of this. I will not make them hold my mess. He considered her for a moment, then nodded. That is your responsibility, he said. Take it. She stood in the doorway, hands light at her sides, as if holding something invisible and fragile. Will you be all right here? I will be all right anywhere I am not mocked for who I am, he said. I have work waiting in the morning. A crew that will pay me what a good day of labor earns. A bed that is paid for in quiet. That is enough. She bit her lip. Did you ever feel small next to me? Never, he said. I felt small next to the version of you who needed me to be inferior, so she could feel tall. I do not want to be that version anymore, she said. Then do not be, he replied. But do not ask me to stand near while you learn. She nodded, absorbing the distance his words drew between them. It was not cruelty. It was an honest border. Goodbye, Deshawn, she said. Goodbye, Tiffany, he said. She stepped out into the night. The porch light cast a quiet halo on the walkway. The wind chimes clicked softly. Across the street, a dog barked once and then settled down. She walked to the car without looking back. Inside the rental, her hands trembled on the steering wheel. She sat there until the trembling eased. She started the engine and drove to the small airport hotel she had booked on her phone in the driveway. She checked in and lay awake for a long time, staring at the textured ceiling, listening to the whir of the air conditioning. In the morning, she returned the car and flew back to Detroit. Her mother met her at the curb. Neither of them spoke until they reached the kitchen table, where coffee steamed in 2 mugs. Did you see him? Her mother asked. Yes, Tiffany said. How is he? Alive, Tiffany said. Calm. Her mother nodded, as if those 2 words were a prayer, quietly answered. What will you do now? Tiffany looked down at her hands. I will find a place to live, she said. I will get a second job. I will know the cost of things. Her father came in from the backyard, wiping his hands on a towel. We can help with the first month, he said. After that, you will handle your own life. Tiffany nodded. I will. Over the next weeks, she carried her boxes out to a small, older apartment on a quiet street not far from where she had grown up. She returned the key to her parents' guest room and thanked her mother for the space. She learned the sound the faucet made when it needed a new washer and called the landlord to ask how to fix it. She bought groceries with cash and watched the register totals like a student studying for an exam. Occasionally, she opened the manila envelope again and traced the careful strokes of his signature with her eyes, not with her fingers. She read the line he had written again and again. You wanted me gone. Now you have your wish. She understood that the sentence was not a punishment. It was a mirror. Once, she ran into Calvin at a hardware store. He saw her before she saw him. He nodded politely, not unkindly. Calvin, she said. Did he seem, when you helped him pack, did he seem angry? He seemed like a man finished with something, Calvin said. There is a difference. Is he happy? She asked. I do not know, Calvin said. Happiness is not a thing people carry around like a tool. It is a quiet that shows up when there is room for it. She nodded and stepped aside to let him pass. He hesitated, then said, Do better with whoever comes next. That is the only fair thing. I will try, she said. Thank you. In Charlotte, Deshawn woke before sunrise and made coffee in a dented stovetop pot. He took jobs with a crew that respected a man who showed up early and left as the sun fingers shortened in the afternoon. He ate well and slept deeply. He kept a small jar on the shelf above the stove where he put the change he would have thrown by the door in Detroit. The pile grew steadily, quarters and folded bills, and the neat dignity of a man who wanted little but earned what he needed. He did not count the days since the divorce. He counted the days that fell clean. He called his parents on Sundays and told them the small truths of a week. A supervisor who was fair, a tool that needed replacing, a neighbor who said hello and meant it. On a late afternoon, he stood on the porch, watching rain bead on the rail and slip down the wood. He thought of the house in Detroit, its echoing rooms, its old title, its final lock. He pictured the moment he slid the note into the suitcase and closed it. He had not written those words to be cruel. He had written them to be exact. When the rain stopped, he went inside, set out a clean shirt for morning, and turned on the old record player. A trumpet swelled and softened. He sat and listened to it fill the room. Months later, a letter arrived in a plain envelope with a Detroit postmark and his name written in a hand he recognized. He stood with it at the small kitchen table, ran a thumb along the edge, then opened it. Inside was a single sheet. He read quietly. She did not ask for anything. She did not argue with what had happened. She wrote that she had learned how much silence a person could sit inside when they had broken their own life with their own hands. She wrote that she hoped he was well, and that she understood if he never replied. He placed the letter back in its envelope and tucked it in the back of a drawer. He did not answer. He did not owe that to her or to the past. He owed the morning to himself. Across states and seasons, their lives continued. Tiffany's apartment filled slowly with the things she could afford. A sturdy couch from a second-hand store, a table with a small nick where the varnish had worn thin, a lamp with a shade that cast a warm circle at night when she read. She found a new job at a clinic's front desk and kept the other one she had taken to catch up on the deposit for her place. She did not look for Brandon Pierce. He had been a shadow. She stopped performing for shadows. On a winter afternoon, snow fell slow and steady outside her window. She made a pot of tea and sat with the quiet that used to frighten her. She let it be what it was, not a judgment, not a punishment, not a stage without an audience. It was only a room. It was only her. In the spring, she called her parents and invited them over for dinner. She cooked what she could cook well. Her father fixed the loose hinge on the cabinet door without being asked. Her mother dried dishes and then sat with Tiffany while the faucet hissed. "It is strange," Tiffany said. "I thought I would feel empty forever." "Emptiness gets bored," her mother said. "It does not linger where it is not fed." Tiffany smiled. "Do you think he's all right?" "I think he is himself," her mother said. "That has always been more than all right." Tiffany nodded. She did not ask for updates anymore. She honored the border he had drawn with the same care she wished she had honored his presence. On a summer morning in Charlotte, Deshaun tightened a bolt, wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, and looked up into a bright sky. Someone turned up a radio 2 houses down, and a slow song drifted over the street. He thought, for a fleeting second, of a kitchen in Detroit and a wine glass beside a magazine, and then he let the memory dissolve. There were joys to measure. There was a lunch wrapped in wax paper on the tailgate of his truck. There was a day to finish, and an evening to meet with both hands open. The past had been a house. He had sold it. The car had been a gift. He had let it go. The marriage had been a promise. He had kept it until it no longer had any place to be kept. Some losses are not accidents. They're the price of betrayal. He had paid, and he had left. And somewhere in the distance between one life and the next, a man who had been mocked for his smallness took a quiet, deliberate breath and knew himself to be free. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.